In the episode before this, episode 86, we learned that ALSA Mind can read your future. Code is running your life. What code? The bioelectric code. And ALSA Mind can read that code and can edit it. We're going to Google bioelectric code. The bioelectric code refers to the system of electrical signals and voltage patterns generated by cells that dictate tissue growth, regeneration, and anatomical structure, acting independently of or in conjunction with the genetic code. Researchers can manipulate these bioelectric patterns to alter body shape, trigger limb regeneration, or suppress cancer without changing DNA. The key aspects of the bioelectric code. Definition. The code is a mapping between the ion channel controlled membrane voltage of cells and the resulting anatomical structure. Function. It acts as a software that governs large-scale body patterning, instructing cells on where to form organs and how to regenerate. Signaling. Cells communicate using voltage gradients to make collective decisions about growth. Control over DNA. While the genome dictates the parts list, proteins, the bioelectric code provides the blueprints for how to assemble them. Medical applications. Researchers, including those at the Allen Institute, have successfully used this to regenerate limbs in frogs and change the anatomical layout of planaria, with future potential for cancer treatment and regenerative medicine. Mechanisms of action. Ion channels and pumps in cell membranes create specific electrical or bioelectric patterns. These, for example, can determine where an eye should form in an embryo. By manipulating these channels, either with drugs or by introducing new channels, scientists can change these patterns, overriding normal development to create, for example, two-headed planaria. Significance. The ability to read and write this code means that, in theory, researchers can re-instruct cells to reverse damage, fix birth defects, or prevent tumors. Pioneers in the field. Key work in this field has been constructed by scientists like Michael Levin at the Allen Discovery Center at Tufts University, who has shown that these electrical signals can be manipulated to change the body's structure. Let's go over here to the National Institute of Health, and we're going to read Cracking the Bioelectric Code. Patterns of resting potential in non-excitable cells of living tissue are now known to be instructive signals for pattern formation during embryogenesis, regeneration, and cancer suppression. The development of molecular-level techniques for tracking ion flows and functionally manipulating the activity of ion channels and pumps has begun to reveal the mechanisms by which voltage gradients regulate cell behaviors and the assembly of complex large-scale structures. A recent paper demonstrated that a specific voltage range is necessary for demarcation of eye fields in the frog embryo. Remarkably, artificially setting other somatic cells to the eye-specific voltage range resulted in formation of eyes in aberrant locations, including tissues that are not in the normal anterior ectoderm lineage. Eyes could be formed in the gut, on the tail, or in the lateral plate mesoderm. These data challenge the existing models of eye fate restriction and tissue competence maps, and suggest the presence of a bioelectric code, a mapping of physiological properties to anatomical outcomes. This addendum summarizes the current state of knowledge in developmental bioelectricity, proposes 3 possible interpretations of the bioelectric code that functionally maps physiological states to anatomical outcomes, and highlights the biggest open question in this field. We also suggest a speculative hypothesis at the intersection of cognitive science and developmental biology, that bioelectrical signaling among non-excitable cells, coupled by gap junction, simulates neural network-like dynamics and underlies the information processing functions required by complex pattern formation in vivo. Understanding and learning to control the information stored in physiological networks will have transformative implications for developmental biology, regenerative medicine, and synthetic bioengineering. The key words here are bioelectricity, ion channels, pattern formation, and regeneration. Let's look at Figure 1. Multiscale bioelectric gradients in vivo, segregation of ions by ion channel and pump proteins, and open high conductivity paths through gap junction, cytoplasm, and extracellular fluids produce gradients of voltage potential. These exit at the level of organelles. For example, nuclear envelope potential. A. Cells. Transmembrane potential. B. Tissues. Transepithelial potential. C. And even whole animal or appendages. D. Schematic drawn by Maria Lobikin. Now we're going to go back to Google and we're going to click on another link. Here we have Science Direct. The bioelectric code, an ancient computational medium for dynamic control of growth and form. What determines large-scale anatomy? DNA does not directly specify geometrical arrangements of tissues and organs, and a process of encoding and decoding for morphogenesis is required. Moreover, many species can regenerate and remodel their structure despite drastic injury. The ability to obtain the correct target morphology from a diversity of initial conditions reveals that the morphogenetic code implements a rich system of pattern homeostatic processes. Here, we describe an important mechanism by which cellular networks implement pattern regulation and plasticity. Bioelectricity. All cells, not only nerves and muscles, produce and sense electrical signals. In vivo, these processes form bioelectric circuits that harness individual cell behaviors towards specific anatomical endpoints. We review emerging progress in reading and rewriting anatomical information encoded in bioelectrical states, and discuss the approaches to this problem from the perspective of information theory, dynamical systems, and computational neuroscience. Cracking the bioelectric code will enable much improved control over biological patterning, advancing basic evolutionary developmental biology, as well as enabling numerous applications in regenerative medicine and synthetic bioengineering. Now let's scroll down. Evolutionary origins of bioelectricity, neural and non-neural. Brains use electrical networks to implement decision-making and memory and to harness the triggering of specific cell behaviors, like muscle contractions, gland secretions, and changes in cell proliferation and gene expression, to large-scale goals that are represented in cognitive constructs. It is becoming increasingly appreciated that communication via electrical processes is not unique to nervous systems, but in fact evolved continuously from far more evolutionarily ancient properties. Why is bioelectric signaling an example of a code? Bioelectric signaling is your biosignals. We will cover biosignals in the next episode. We use several key features to define the existence of a quote-unquote code, in distinction to a purely mechanistic set of consecutive physical states? When does some property encode information, rather than merely causing downstream events? This is a complex philosophical issue related to an extensive literature on causation and semiotics. Unification, neural versus non-neural bioelectric codes. How related are developmental bioelectric codes to the more familiar electrical signaling that encodes information in the nervous system? The mechanisms that implement the bioelectric code are not new, exotic inventions in the evolutionary process. These are ancient, primitive, highly conserved properties that evolved from basic physiological functions in pre-metazoa, which had to use ion flux to drive adaptive behavior, patterning, and metabolism all in one cell. We're going back to Google, and we're going to click on this link. This is the Allen Institute. Allen Discovery Center. Researchers use bioelectric code to override genetic code. Researchers at the Allen Discovery Center at Tufts University have shown that permanent changes to body shape can be made by resetting their bioelectric code, effectively overriding the present genetic code. This was released in 2017. The results published today, being in 2017, in Biophysical Journal, show the power of the bioelectric code to control large-scale body shape and perhaps provide a powerful tool for regenerative medicine. The findings open a fundamentally new scientific door to rewriting tissue shapes at will, using the external bioelectric code as a kind of a software that tells the genetic hardware what instructions to execute. With this work, we now know that bioelectric properties can permanently override the default body shape called for by a genome, that regenerative target morphology can be edited to diverge from the current anatomy, and that bioelectric networks can be a control point for investigating cryptic, previously unobservable phenotypes, says Michael Levin, director of the Allen Discovery Center at Tufts. The flatworm species Polaria is known for its regenerative abilities. When cut into pieces, each fragment of the worm regrows its missing pieces to become an entire worm, typically identical to the original worm. Levin's team altered the worm's bioelectric codes by interrupting the electrical communication between networks of cells. When these worms were segmented, 25% of them grew 2 heads. Though researchers initially thought the 72% of worms that grew just 1 head were unaffected, when these worms were segmented, they produced the same ratio of 2-headed to 1-headed worms. These results point to the power of the bioelectric code, not only to control body plan, but to store memory of shape alterations, even if they do not involve the genome. The altered regenerative body plan is stored in the bioelectric networks in the cells of seemingly normal planaria, and the body-wide bioelectric gradients serve as a kind of pattern memory, said Fallon Durant, the paper's first author. Bioelectric signals can act as a switch that not only can change body plan anatomy, but also undo those changes when reversed.